we're going to begin this class right away, and we'll go through a little bit of an introduction to the class. I'm not going to so much for this class. Maybe I'll do it next time, but certainly since we're running late, I'm not going to give so much of an introduction of what Kabbalah is. I'm going to leave that potentially for another class, or potentially for another class in this series. I will tell you that most of this class is based off a work called Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim is written by Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin. He is the prime student of the Gaon of Vilna, known as the Gra, or the Gaon of Vilna, who wrote prolifically on Kabbalah. Potentially one of the greatest Torah scholars who has lived in the last, who knows, long time. So even before Corona, as far as I understand. So he was a tremendous Torah scholar, and his prime student was Rabbi Chaim Volozhin. Rabbi Chaim Volozhin wrote this book, Nefesh HaChaim, and he makes a lot of, he had a certain agenda, but he makes a lot of Kabbalistic ideas accessible. Again, for an agenda, but at the end of the day, he does make them accessible. So I set this up as a three-part introduction, and I'm going to just lay out what the parts will be. The first part, which we'll do tonight, God willing, we're going to talk about the neshama and the effect of mitzvos, how the neshama and mitzvos affect the spiritual universe. That is the first thing. So the first part we'll be talking about the neshama, the soul of a human being, and how that affects how the mitzvos and the neshama affects the spiritual world. The second class is a dive a little bit deeper into Kabbalah, which talks about what God willing we'll talk about what's referred to as the tzimtzum, which is, we're not going to go so far into it. So for those who are a little more well versed, that is an unending topic, but it deals with the contradiction between infinity and reality. Those are self-contradictory, and we'll deal a little bit with that. And then at the third class, God willing, we'll deal with the mechanics of tefillah and Torah, what tefillah and Torah interlock with the metaphysical universe, with the spiritual world. We'll deal a little bit with that. So, but tonight we're gonna keep our focus on the neshama, and hopefully, that'll lead us to mitzvos. And we're going to start at a little bit of a different place, and we'll work our way towards there. What I hope to come out from this class, what I hope everyone will come out of this class, is a clear understanding of the power of humanity and the impact our mitzvos have on the universe. That is what I would like us to come out with. Again, the power that humanity has via their mitzvos, and God forbid other things, how that impacts humanity. So let's start. We're going to start from a little bit of a different angle, and I would prefer if someone has a question on the topic for now. If someone has a question, I prefer you unmute yourself and speak up rather than write it in the chat, because I'm absolutely awful multitasker. Awful, as bad as it gets. You can ask my wife; she will attest to it. I am a terrible multitasker. So for me to open the chat and be able to focus, not going to happen. By the way, I do want to have a big shout out to all of you that actually had the guts to keep your camera on. That is, I think, 3 people on the screen. Thank you. I don't know what it is with people, but they're like, oh, okay, 4, 5. Thank you. I see you waving, Alex. So I do appreciate it. It is very funny to speak to a lot of names. It's like the weirdest thing. You're like, no matter how funny you are, interesting, motivating, the names still look the same. Nothing changes. So you'd like it if the names would change color if you're funny or something. But in any case, so we're going to start from a specific place. We're going to start from a verse in Torah in Bereshis. I would throw it up on the screen, but unfortunately, I don't have the ability at this moment. So the verse in the Torah at the very beginning of Bereshis, in creation, it goes through, as we all know, 6 days of creation, and in there. When it gets to the creation of humanity, it has a very enigmatic verse. And this is where the Nefesh HaChaim begins as well with this verse. And this is going to be the launching point for our conversation. The Torah specifically enumerates that humanity was created with something called the Tselem Elokim. The Tselem Udmus Barosa. Hashem created us with that Tselem and a Dmus, which loosely translated, or simply translated, we should say, which is the way that the Nefesh HaChaim goes about it, is a likeness. There's some sort of likeness to God. Now, the Torah at no point tells us afterwards what that likeness is. If I were to do a survey over here and I would ask you all to type in, if I did a poll, I imagine I'd get like a good 10 answers. Somehow they'll all intuitively, like, either we don't understand it or we think, oh, it's some sort of, I don't know, I don't know what people would come up with. But one thing we have to know is the following. Whatever it is, it cannot mean a physical likeness for the following two reasons. Number one, whatever physical likeness you're going to point out about humanity, you'll probably find all those very physical components in the animal kingdom as well. So it's unique to humanity that humanity is created with a likeness to God. So if that likeness is a physical component, then you should find that why only speak about humanity with that physical component, that physical likeness? A tremendous amount of creation has that likeness. So that's kind of question number one. But there's a bigger problem with saying that there's a physical likeness between us and Hashem, which is that one of the 13 attributes of faith, one of the 13 animam is the 13 principles of faith that is incumbent upon a Torah believing Jew, a God, someone who believes in Hashem, is to believe that he has ein lo guf. That God has no body. There is no physical manifestation of God. So to say that we have our tselem, that our likeness to Hashem is of physical nature, would be obviously, one, silly, because why are you specifically, why is it local to humanity? Say it about all of creation. Number two is it's heretical. It's specifically enumerated in Maimonides, again, 13 principles of faith. You're not allowed to believe such a thing. So we want to begin by trying to understand what is this likeness to Hashem. It's interesting, actually. I remember many, many years ago when I first got myself really into learning. I didn't grow up with such a strong learning background. I was 18, and I was kind of a soul-seeking kid, and I kind of I guess I was in Israel, for lack of a better way of describing my journey. I kind of stumbled upon learning, and I remember one of my mentors mentioning to me, he was talking about like sci-fi movies, and he pointed out, he said, do you realize, now I don't know if this is so true, but it's mostly true, that if you take any sci-fi, extraterrestrial, they always have human components, because that's what we can imagine. Now, I think in more modern sci-fi movies, you probably don't have that. You probably have examples of where that is not true, but certainly in older ones, you'll arms, legs, head, whatever it is, you'll have those, mouth, you'll have those. We can't really imagine what a life force, this was his point. It doesn't really make a difference, but we can't really imagine what a life force would be without it. So again, a little bit of a tangent, but the point is that it is impossible for us to say that the likeness that we have with Hashem is one of physical nature. There's another point, there's another dimension, and one that is also very striking. And the Nefesh Chaim points this out as well. We know there are many different names of Hashem throughout the Torah. Specifically, we know probably the Shem Havaya, which is the Yud, Hey, and Vav Hey name of Hashem, is probably the most prominent in the Torah. We don't even pronounce that name. We pronounce the name as Ado and Nai, as that is the name that we use to refer to Hashem, our master. And there's actually 7 names that we can say that the Torah uses, which would be a Torah prohibition of erasing: Tzvakos, Kel, Elokim, Shakai, Akash. There are 7 names that are articulated as being names that have some sort of level of holiness that is not allowed to erase it. If it would be written on a piece of paper for the sake of kedusha, for the sake of holiness, you would have to bury that piece of paper. There's a lot of other names that Kabbalah says, but we know those 7 names. We specifically, when the Torah articulates this likeness to Hashem, it uses one specific name. It says we are like Elokim. Now, it doesn't say we are like the name Yud Hey and Vav Hey. It doesn't say that. As a matter of fact, God willing, after class 2, you'll come to the conclusion that God forbid to say such a thing. That would be completely preposterous to say such a thing. That's not this class. That's a coming attraction for the next one. But in this class, we want to focus on why is it specifically of all the names that we have likeness to, it's Elokim, specifically of Elokim. It's a very, very interesting point. And as we flesh it out, it's going to open up a door to a whole world of understanding, both about Hashem, our relationship with Hashem, and about ourselves. There's another question, though, that probably even precedes that question. We want to ask ourselves as we go through the trying to deeper understanding, to try to pull up a deeper understanding of the metaphysical world of Hashem. Why in the world would Hashem need more than one name? What's up with that? I mean, presumably, a name is just a pointer for us to be able to both recognize the subject of the sentence. So if we would not have, for example, just the word table, if the word table would not exist in a vocabulary, so both of us would wind up, both of us wind up sitting and say, why don't you sit in this chair and pull it close to the thing with four legs and surface? And that would become a very awkward conversation each time to, tell your kids, pull yourself closer to the thing with four legs and surface. Like, I mean, it's just like, especially if you have a little bit rambunctious children, it's going to be a constant. Don't stand on the thing with four legs and surface. Like, I mean, it's not efficient. So what we do is we ascribe a noun to it. We take all of those components, ascribe some sort of just a word that allows us to communicate the thought and say table. We both know table has no real significance. It's table, has no real significance in and of itself, but it allows us both to understand what's going on. As a matter of fact, as many have heard in linguistics, many years ago, I took a lot of courses in linguistics, specifically in something called neurolinguistic programming, and they point out very, very rightfully, specifically, and for anyone who's interested in this, in Ericksonian hypnotherapy, that a person will tend to miss details, or completely, based on the vocabulary that they have in their own mind, they will completely overlook details, not process them, just because they don't have anything to ascribe certain adjectives or nouns to those details. So we now have to ask, what is the purpose of having two names of God? Just give me one name. Oh my God, I'm good. I got it. The one above, the great one, the holy one, that's all fine. I mean, what is the purpose of having more than one name? So I want to just repeat those questions. We're going to go on for a second. We're going to talk about the tselem, this likeness to Elokim, to God. And we want to understand, what is this likeness? What is this likeness made up of? In what way are we like Hashem? And why is it specifically a likeness to Elokim? And even more than that, why does Hashem even have another name? If you're going to say it's Elokim, because Elokim has a component, so why does Hashem have more other names besides Elokim? So with that, we're going to start our journey a little bit in the way that Nefesh HaChaim does, and scratch the surface of this likeness that we have toward to Elokim. And we need to, in order to do that, we're going to need to begin with a couple of very, very specific axioms that are foundational to all Kabbalistic thought. You'll find this in no matter if you pick up Hasidic works, you pick up works of whatever camp of anyone who touches Jewish philosophical works, like the Maharal, who doesn't speak about Kabbalah he doesn't use Kabbalistic words at all. He speaks in a much more philosophical tone, but drawing on algorithms and ideas of Kabbalah. All of them take a couple of axioms for granted, and we're going to need to draw on some of those axioms. The first axiom I want to introduce is the makeup of the metaphysical world vis-a-vis reality. The Zohar discusses the following idea. First of all, number one, the levels between what we call the spiritual world, whatever that means, the something that is beyond finite existence, the levels that exist between the spiritual dimension, the spiritual world, and our physical dimension are infinite. There are infinite amounts of letters, levels rather, not letters, levels. There's infinite amount of levels, so that if you were to talk about something becoming more concretized from something being very, very spiritual, there would be level after level after level until it reaches what we call reality. Now, that in itself is hard to understand. And again, that's not the topic, it'd be the topic of another class, which is the second class, is how you can have those, for those who are into philosophy, how you could have reality and infinity coexist. However, leaving that aside, there are multiple levels between, infinite amount of levels between us and the spiritual realm. We're not going to focus on that. There's a second aspect. There's a B to that we need to understand. And it works as follows. And it's once we get used to this idea, we will see it everywhere. You'll be able to find this idea everywhere. The truth of it is it's prevalent throughout our entire existence. And it goes as follows. Those levels work like a chain link. The top link, the bottom, the lowest level, the bottom of the upper link forms the inside of the link under it. So as when you have a level of reality that is higher than ours, whatever it means, the lowest level of that needs to be defined. But whatever we can conceptually understand, the lowest part of that level, the most physical part of that reality is the most spiritual part. It also duels as the most spiritual part of our reality. And it goes that way all the way down as a link, as one link into another link into another link. Now let's flesh out this idea because it's a fascinating idea. And again, it's something, the truth is it sounds so esoteric. It sounds so like, okay, like, sure, if you say so, like, how am I going to argue? But once you actually are used to the concept, you'll see it everywhere. Let's take first of all, human action, a human being. So we're all used to the fact that human being works, a human being, is constantly acting in this world, and most of how we judge a human being is based on the actions that we see. Some people, if you're a smaller person, it's always in the moment. If they did this, they did X, they judge badly. They did Y, they judge well. If a person's maybe a little bit of a bigger person, a more mature person, it's over a span of time. You realize that there was a yesterday and there's a tomorrow. This person, this person has certain things that are contributing to the way that they're acting. But ultimately speaking, the sum total we experience of a human being is based on a world of action. However, all of us know with ourselves, it's very easy to tell with ourselves, all of us know that we have a deeper reality. There's something deeper going on. People can't see the fact that there's more going on in my mind. I didn't want that to happen. That's not what I want. I wanted to do better. I meant to do better. I tried to do better. I hope to do better. You don't realize what forced my hand into this situation. There's an infinite world behind those actions within my brain. So we see that there is an outer shell of what we are. The outer shell of what we are has an inner core that is almost infinite compared to the outer shell. So, for example, let's connect that to the level up. What made my inside be that it is, be the way it is? What programmed my brain to be as it is? Well, guess what? It was connected to something before it. There was DNA that came, and there was nature and nurture. I grew up with certain experiences that I had no choice in those experiences. All the actions of the world before me contributed to my mind. That mind now is my innard, and that is only acts as the inside. It acts as the deeper core to my actions, and my actions will affect someone else's, and it continues that way. Let's give another example, maybe a little bit of an easier example. If we take a teacher and a student relationship, so a teacher might come in. Let's say a professor. Let's say someone who's let's say a Torah teacher. So a Torah teacher, my teachers. So I was blessed with teachers who I probably would spend my life trying to reach the toes of their understanding of Torah, but I was able to glean what I can from what they taught. Now I know, and I'm not trying to say this to be humble because I'm not a humble person. I know that if I explored more into their mind, if I could read their mind, I know that there's so much more in there. But ultimately speaking, I can only access what they projected to me. So now let's push pause on that frame and see. The relationship between my teacher and me is the outermost expression of my teacher became the innermost understanding that I have. And now I'm expressing it to someone else. I'm expressing it here. So you're getting a piece of the inside of my brain, which is connected to the outer expression of my teacher. This is something that we will find all over the connection, the way you have something on the outside projects itself and becomes the inner core of something else. And this continues level after level. In fact, just as parenthetical, even the process, I like to point out to people, even the process of going from something, from my mind, relative to my actions, my mind is infinite. Relative to my actions, my mind can conjure up, I'm indefinite. It can conjure up indefinite ideas and different combinations or permutations of what I'd like to do. However, my actions still have to concretize it into one thing. Let's take an example and see these levels for a second. I like to use this example, but you could use any example. So anybody who learns with me, which is a bunch of people on this call who have studied with me personally over time, I take the iPhone, for example. The first time the iPhone went from being infinite, it just not existing, to existence, was not in an Apple store. It was in the mind of Steve Jobs, let's say. So what happened is moments before Steve Jobs thought about it, there was a bunch of neurons in his head that were unconnected, and it could have done anything. Those neurons could have put anything together, but somehow one day he said, iPhone. Now, once that happened, we now have a reality that is so tangible compared to the reality before it. It's almost like it's a completely different existence, because before it, there was, if you would ask him, what are you thinking about? He'd say, oh, thinking about a million things. This is a typical, by the way, typical guy answer. Like I remember I like to talk about, like, I was on a hike with my wife. This is going back, I don't know, 5 years ago. And my wife we're going on this hike up a mountain, and she's like, after we're quiet for like 10 minutes, she turns to me and she says, what are you thinking about? And I'm like, nothing. She's like, no, really? Like, what are you thinking about? And I'm like, no, seriously, like nothing. Like, there's like, I don't know. Like, there was nothing concrete. It was just going all over the place. Like, and she was like, deep into some sort of like practical issue that needed to be solved. And I was like, oh, I'm just thinking about nothing. So the moment before Steve Jobs had that thought, there was an infinite amount of possibilities that he could have had. But yet a moment later, from our experience as observers, we see nothing. But from the world of reality, the truth is something just came onto the scene that never existed before. But that's a very, very fine reality. It's a reality of thought. If it's still completely flimsy, completely, it's unmolded, it's unformed. And if he wanted to take it further, he would, in the world of thought, an iPhone can also be an elephant. I mean, there's no difference. But if he wants to communicate it, so then he might say it over to somebody. Now, once you say it over to somebody, you can only say one thing at a time. You either mean an iPhone or you mean an elephant. Those don't coexist. So now it becomes something that's more tangible, because I have to give it properties in order to communicate it. And then maybe if I want to go take it further, I'll write it down on a piece of paper. If I write it down on a piece of paper, then I have to start studying dimensions. I need a piece of paper that fits it. And so then now it's really concrete. Now it can't be that, that it's an iPhone that's 8 different sizes at the same time. When I speak to you, it can be. How big is it? I don't know, 2 inches, 3 and 4 and 5, it doesn't make a difference, right? But once I draw it, if I'm going to draw it to scale, then it has to have properties. Until I finally create it, once I create it, it's stuck. It's stuck. And this is true. And each level is an entire world of being more tangible, more concrete than the level before it. So we see these numerous levels of existence, and each one of those will become the inner core to the level under it. It's this infinite chain link. Now, that's axiom number 1. That's all axiom number 1. Infinite levels of reality, the upper level forming the inner level, the inner core to the outer shell that's under it, and all the way down. The second axiom that the Nefesh HaChaim takes for granted is the following. The Nefesh L'Chaim takes for granted that everything, that all the properties will continue to develop in the same vein. So, for example, let's take an example. So, if we were to identify a property, some sort of algorithm, some sort of paradigm in this world, that paradigm, if we can say that it's true, we will expect that paradigm will exist everywhere. Let's take an example. Let's take a concrete example. If I were to show you a right angle, so a right angle in this world will be true on a molecular level, or if I go to Pluto, it will also be a right angle. It doesn't make a difference. And if I actually look at the universe at a very, very big scale, and I have an instrument to measure, a right angle is a right angle, because a right angle is not bound by the space that's in front of it. It's a root idea that will manifest itself within each level, which in each strata that I'm looking at in reality. It's a right angle. It doesn't make a difference where I am. So there is, the concept is that if I were to continuously break something down and break it down again and break it down again, I will continuously find that the same properties exist again, within again. I'm going to give you an illustration, which I am not saying is true. Do not quote Spivak as saying, I heard Spivak said true. I have no idea if it's true, but it's a great illustration of it. It'll just to drive the idea. I'm not somebody to tell me it's true. And if you Google it, you'll see pictures of it. But you know what? I can Photoshop those pictures too. So I'm just not taking any responsibility. But I've been told that if you go to the mountain that is purportedly the Mount Sinai, and you pick up any rock from that mountain, and you can Google it and you go look at what pictures would look like if this is true. Again, I find it very hard to believe, but it'll be a nice illustration. If you pick up any rock from that mountain, the rock will have cracks within it that looks like a bush. But more than that, if you take the rock then and smash and crack the rock, every one of the pieces of that rock, each one of the pieces will have cracks in it that look like a bush. And if you crack each one of those pieces, it will have cracks in it that look like a bush. Now, do I believe that that's true? Sure. And I have a bridge to sell you as well, but it doesn't make a difference. The point is that if you break down something again and again and again, you're going to find the pratim and the klal. It says klal pratim shavim, which means the details and the rules are the same. They are the same. If you understand how to isolate the variables, they are the same. They're working with the same sort of spiritual periodic table. There's no difference. The same algorithms, the same paradigms. Which is why, by the way, you can have a book like the Maharal, who's talking about our human experience. Everything he's talking about is human experience. And if you were to represent it in math, you would find that same math represented in Kabbalah. And there would be no difference, because it follows the exact same pattern. However, the Maharal doesn't talk about Kabbalah, not much, here and there a little bit. But somehow you have this internal awareness. He's saying something that sounds like it's from somewhere else. So this chain down and down and down looks exactly the same, with more and more, just with multiplicity of the paradigm again and again and again and again, until it concretizes into something that's we call reality. And so there's a number of paradigms that exist, whatever that is, and those continuously go down the chain. The very, very bottom of that chain is where we will find what we refer to as reality, and that culminates in humanity. Humanity exists at the very, very bottom of the chain. There's a Gemara. The Gemara says, the Pasuk says, David HaMelech says, Baruch Nafsho Hashem, v'chol kravai Hashem kadsho. He says, I bless Hashem, and all of my innards praise Hashem. Every detail of a human being somehow parallels the entire metaphysical universe, from in all its details, in all of its glory. As a matter of fact, for those that are more advanced in the study of in Kabbalah, not really a topic for our time. As a matter of fact, the entire universe put together is referred to as Adam Kadmon, as the primal human being. It's that, so to speak, if one could go 35,000 feet and look at all of reality, it would all look like a human being. Now, of course, it wouldn't look like a human being. That's ridiculous. But it would look like, you would have the components and the ideas, the paradigms would all play themselves out through all of reality the same way of a human being. You would have For example, and I'll just give some of the examples that the Ramchal himself brings. A split of a human being. You have a right eye and a left eye that parallel each other. You have two nostrils that parallel each other, and 2 ears that parallel, but yet a mouth that's only a single, and there's no parallel to it. Why? You have hair that's disconnected from the head. If you do have hair, just saying, throwing it out there. If anybody has any extra, I'll take it. So if you have hair that's disconnected from the head, and you have a right arm and a left arm. One arm is generally speaking stronger than the other arm. That's a generalization. And you have legs that cause movement, and all those things, and each one of those somehow parallel what we would call the physical map of reality. So the very, very design of a human being parallels all of these worlds. The very bottom of that humanity, as I said, and the human being, as the Ramchal says, it's a fascinating piece of Ramchal and Das Tfunos for those study Das Tfunos, the knowing heart, or there's a new version of it with a different English title. I don't remember what it is, the God's master plan or something like that. But in any case, knowing God's plan. So somewhere towards the beginning, he discusses the technology of a clock, like the clock tower from Back to the Future, that kind of clock, with all the cogs. And he talks about the human being this teeny cog in the middle, and that cog is needed to turn all the other cogs. That the human being is the power that makes all the other cogs turn, and is connected to each one of those cogs. And as it turns the next cog, which turns the next cog, which turns the next cog, which turns the next cog. And this is, we're going to talk about this as we go on. But what comes out is that the human being through a human's thoughts, speech, and actions actually wields control of reality. And I'm not telling you something that's it's not even a novelty of the Nefesh HaChaim. This is something that you find through all of Kabbalistic works. No one's going to disagree with this. This is an axiom in it. They take this for granted that you understand this. So that human being his thoughts, speech, and actions, or her thoughts, speech, and actions, affects the entire universe. With every thought you've created or you've either created or destroyed. With every speech, with every action. It's interesting. So the Nefesh Chaim mentions at the very, very beginning that it says that God blew a neshama into the nostrils of humanity, and it says it became a nefesh chaya. It became a nefesh chaya, and he says it means that the human being became the nefesh. He became the soul of the world. That means that the same way that if, God forbid, if a person's soul wasn't in their body, which I have had, unfortunately or fortunately, if you look at it, I've had the opportunity to confront a number of times on the Chaver Kadisha. So when you see a body without a soul, it's lifeless. So too, before humanity was around, before humanity was instilled with that nefesh, the world was lifeless so that it was static. Nothing could change. Once a human being is created, is put on the scene, the human being becomes the nefesh of the world. The human being controls all of reality. There's a verse. The verse says, "Tnu oz le'elokim." It says, "Give strength to Hashem." It's referring to humanity. It says, "Give strength to Hashem." What do you mean, give strength? What does Hashem need your strength? God needs your strength. I mean, presumably he's bigger than you. I mean, created all reality, right? I mean, he doesn't really need your strength. But the understanding is that a human being, God, sort of speak, in the metaphysical makeup of all of reality, God responds to our deeds, to our actions, so that the way that I look at it, I pardon me for sounding a little bit immature, but it's like I always look at it like it's almost like a tennis match. If we don't serve the ball, then there's no one to then if I hold the ball, then there's no one to hit the ball back. There's no rally. But once I serve, then the ball's served back. So the whole system is initiated by the actions of humankind. Thoughts, speech, actions, all initiated by the actions of humankind. It says, Hashem tzilcha yad yaminacha. Hashem is the shadow of our right hand. Meaning that the same way when you move your right hand, the shadow moves with it. So Hashem moves reality. Reality will respond to human beings' actions. This is the setup of all of reality. That is the way reality is just set up. That the human being initiates being the bottom of the chain, initiates, And as if it says, Yaakov chevel nachal asoya, just another verse. Again, the Nefesh HaChaim makes calls on this verse. Yaakov chevel nachal asoya. Yaakov is the rope of his nachal. And the Nefesh HaChaim says the same way a rope, that, so to speak, a rope that's hanging, if you were to hit the rope, you're going to see a wave that travels through the rope, and it's going to affect from the very, very bottom, no matter well, I shouldn't say no matter, but but high up, it's going to affect it. It's going to ricochet and then all the way back down. It's going to continue back down. So too, when a human being acts, it goes through the entire cosmos, and it causes an opposite and equal reaction. This is the system that all of reality is made up of. So let's take our two axioms for a second before we go on. Number one is that we need to know that there is this infinite chain of reality. There's these, so to speak, it's hard to, I have a problem saying it only because, again, I grew up with a lot, for everybody that knows me, I grew up with a lot of sci-fi stuff. So, I had my share of, somebody once said at a class, they said, it's incredible with, somebody who's on this call, as a matter of fact, once said at a class that I was saying, it's incredible with all the amount of old Hollywood and old music that's in my brain. It's incredible. I have room for anything else. I have so much in there, but it's so hard for me to say these words, because it doesn't resonate for me. But, so to speak, there are multiple levels of reality, multiple worlds. Of course, there aren't multiple worlds, but there are multiple layers of reality, multiple dimensions, almost, again, like, something we can relate to in our own experience, that there's more than what you see. The water is more than what you see. There's a molecular reality beyond water. If you take a microscope, you're going to see a whole other reality in the microscope. There's multiple things going on. There's a periodic table, multiple things going on. And there's a chain link, and the upper level will be the inner core to the level under it. Same way, remember, teacher student. That was axiom number one. And axiom number two, the bottom of that will parallel all the same paradigms of the top, and that bottom level will be found all in humankind. So you will find all the properties, theoretically speaking, if a person was attuned to it, if a person had very, very deep understanding, they can look at a human being and realize all the truths about the metaphysical world as well. Now, that's not something that I would encourage anyone to do, because you probably make a fool of yourself. So better to just go on the books, because somebody did it for us. Like, well, why waste the time? So now let's go on. So now that truth, that manifestation, that crystallization that we find in the human being, that doesn't just exist in a human being alone. As a matter of fact, it crystallizes in a number of different strata. The Nefesh HaChaim here also points to another one, the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash, in its structure, we tend to think of it as, it was probably just a glorious building, built beautifully with all of its grandeur, so a person would come and their heart would be motivated to serve Hashem. True, for sure, no question. But the exact dimensions of the Beit HaMikdash, it says, the Pitzal, when he built the tabernacle, when he built the Mishkan, he did it with Chachma Das Bina. He did it with all of the knowledge of the divine in it, because each component was meant, and specifically, with specific intention, specifically crafted to parallel the entire universe as well, to follow that paradigm. And, so to speak, if anything would be off, then it wouldn't parallel the spiritual world. It wouldn't parallel the spiritual world the way it was supposed to. It would be off. It wouldn't empower what it was supposed to do. So, in the same way that you have a human being representing, culminating all of the properties of reality, of the spiritual world, all of the properties culminating in a human being, and the human being embodies every one of those properties. So too, in the Beit HaMikdash, you have all of the properties of reality found there. If a person is attuned to it, the Ramchal himself has a book that's written on every single one of the different nuances of it and how they're crafted. But one is the Kodesh HaKodashim, something that is the Kodesh HaKodashim parallels the heart, I believe, is one of the things he says, that it's at the very, very center, very, very hidden within. So the Beit HaMikdash, the same way a human being is to the spiritual world in the beings that inhabit this world. The Beit HaMikdash is the place that embodies all the very components of this world. And by the way, the truth is the world itself does. The world itself also parallels the spiritual world, but you're going to find it's going to just be more and more diluted. It's just concentrated and concentrated and concentrated in the Beit HaMikdash, and then that's all concentrated in what's called the Heichal, and that's concentrated in the Kodesh Kodashim. Everything is just more and more concentrated until you get to the Kruvim, the angels itself, and it's but everything just becomes more and more concentrated. So you have the Beit HaMikdash paralleling it in place. Similarly, the actions that a human being does will parallel the spiritual world. A human being is supposed to, a human being is designed to, a human being is commanded to follow certain actions that will empower the spiritual world. This shouldn't be foreign to us. It's very interesting because, we'll momentarily get into mitzvahs. The natural extension of that is mitzvahs, but people have a difficult time believing that what they do really has ramifications. And I think about it all the time. Like when I tell my child, don't eat that or do eat this. It's good for you. It's bad for you. Like the kid's like, what are you talking about? Good. My youngest, my 2-year-old, my wife will say, she labels all foods are on there's two different categories. There's yummy and there's good for us. So there are foods that are yummy and good for us. There are foods that are not good for us and not yummy. There are foods that are, so you have 4 different combinations, right? So, but the kid is like, I don't care what, the yummy, I don't care if it's good for me, it's just yummy. Yummy's fine because there's no other reality besides yummy. What other reality could there be? But we all know, and a mature person knows, what do you mean? It's yummy is like, it's scraping the outside of what is going on inside the human being. So too our actions, we have to believe that our actions are a reality. Our actions create, empower, embody, they actually affect the entire cosmos. And the Nefesh HaChaim says this in such strong words. We'll see God willing again. But the Nefesh HaChaim himself says this in such strong words. You have to believe that. You have to. If you're going in to the study of Torah and mitzvahs, you're going in to try to find out what spirituality is about, what connection with divine is about, what your life is about. You have to know that your actions make a difference. Because if you don't believe your actions make a difference, then who cares? Who cares? It does everything. The entire world stands on your shoulders. Now, sounds like a great Jewish guilt thing to say. Great, and guess what? If it gets messed up, it's your fault. But to some extent, there are certain things that you are tied into. You are tied into that no one else is tied into, and your actions, your actions will empower that. The same way that if a person doesn't have enough vitamin D, they're going to be vitamin D deprived. If you don't act, the world will be deprived of that. So taking these two together, actually the Nefesh HaChaim says an incredible thing. He talks about Nebuchadnezzar who destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. He says the sages of the Talmud say the following: that Nebuchadnezzar, when he destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, he says that a Jewish person with their Torah and mitzvahs could do more damage than Nebuchadnezzar with the Beit HaMikdash. Could do more damage than Nebuchadnezzar when he destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. Why? He says because Nebuchadnezzar he destroyed something that was already destroyed. He says the words the Chazal use, the words that the sages use. He ground something that was ground already, because already by the time he had penetrated the Beit HaMikdash, each different field, each different area of the Beit HaMikdash had already had destruction via our actions. Our actions were off, ricochet. It caused the roots of the Beit HaMikdash to be weakened. Then that started to crumble, almost like if you don't feed a flower, my actions, what's the problem? Why is the flower getting blamed for it? Because if you don't feed the flower, if you don't water the flower is going to die. So we didn't give the proper actions for whatever spiritual nourishment, for whatever reality it needs to keep the root of the Beit HaMikdash. So the Beit HaMikdash started to fall apart. And then when Nebuchadnezzar came, he just ground something that was ground already. It was done. It was toast. It was over already. So they say that he couldn't, had everything been proper, had everything been done properly by the Jewish people at the time, he would have been able to touch Beit HaMikdash. It's a fascinating Vilna Gaon. Totally wasn't going to, just is popping to my mind now. The Vilna Gaon says, who's the teacher of the person who wrote the Nefesh HaChaim, the Vilna Gaon says the following. He says, if there would be a shul, if there would be a synagogue where every single law of the Shulchan Aruch, every single law, Jewish law, was kept in its building, a person would not be able to pray there without concentration. It would be impossible. And when we say every single law, we mean the laws of its structure, The laws of the sanctity that's kept, that a person is supposed to keep in it. The laws of paying the workers on time and not cheating on any single dollar that is built in. It's saying it's not worth it. This is going to be a place that's dedicated to holiness. There's not $1 that will be tainted in the building of this. He said, if there would be such a building, you could not go in there and not have concentration. It would be so invested, so entrenched in holiness, it would be impossible. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for such a place to be built. But the Beis Hamikdash was at this point was already it was destroyed. This chain reaction, we see that this chain reaction, we say that the Malachim, when we say Kedusha, when we recite the Kedusha in the synagogue during the weekend on Shabbos, we say that immediately when the Jewish people recite Kedusha, immediately the angels recite Kedusha, because it's a response, but it's an immediate response because we're moving, we're umbilically moving. There's like a shadow. It's not like the shadow thinks and says, hey, you know what? He's moving and I'm really lazy, but like, what am I going to do? I'm going to blow my cover if I don't do it. Like, so it's got to keep going. So similarly, the entire cosmos has to follow suit with humanity. Now let's get to the name. Let's bring it back to the beginning. Sorry, 1 second, please. Okay, thank you. You know what? Could you? Yeah. So moving on. So let's get back to where we started. We started off talking about the names of Hashem, and we need to know the following: that when we're discussing Hashem, we're talking about an infinite reality. And there is no, as we started saying, if we don't have nouns, if we don't have adjectives, if we don't have a vocabulary to communicate, we don't know anything about it. When we discuss infinity, we don't have a vocabulary to say what that would be like. Let's take an example. You know, my kids have asked me, and all of us have asked ourselves, what would it be like going through a black hole? Like, I've seen sciences, try to wrap your head around it. Like, well, all matter has been totally ripped apart and you're just in this thing that has no matter. Like, and we just lose our vocabulary and suddenly like, I don't know how to describe it because, and frankly, I can't even conjure up a picture. If we can imagine, let's take an example. If we can imagine communicating to, someone who can't see, communicating to someone who can't see, communicating to someone who can't see, communicating what colors look like. You have no vocabulary to do that. There's no way to convey the information. They can't see. They don't know. So without a vocabulary, we have nothing to understand about Hashem. Something we'll talk about, God willing, in the next class when we talk about the name Havaya. We talk about Hashem's name, the name of Hashem, the Yud Hey Vav Hey name of Hashem. However, there are ways that we can connect to Hashem, and that is via consistency. So if Hashem wants a relationship, which Hashem does, Hashem wants a relationship with humanity. That's why we're created. Something that somebody posted, I don't know what that means, but I'm happy to discuss later. But I just meant it as an example. I mean, I said if being blind doesn't mean they can't see. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm very, very happy to discuss it. But we can pick that up after. But I lost my own train of thought. So I told you I can't multitask. I just can't do that. So I'd rather speak up. So when we talk about if Hashem wants to have a relationship with humanity, so what Hashem will do is act in a way with consistent patterns. That allows us to relate to those patterns. Now, we're not relating to Hashem's being. For example, let me give you an example here. I put on a certain tie, I put on a jacket. I have this certain way that I want to present myself to you. I want you to relate to me in that way. Now, you don't know what happens when I go home, and you don't know what happens in the rest of my life. You don't know and even the people here that know me better, which there's a number of people that know me better, still there are dimensions that you will never know about me. And that's the reality. So what you see is the way that I want to be related to, and that's how I present myself. But there's really an infinite Spivak behind there. So Hashem has certain things that He wants us to access from, whatever that means, and those ways of access, those consistent patterns that Hashem presents himself in reality and consistently he acts in reality in a way that we can understand what's going to happen, so to speak, in our daily life. For example, imagine if there was no consistency in gravity. So sometimes you wake up in the morning and you float up, and sometimes you're going to hit the floor. You go crazy. You'd wake up and like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to get out. Like you start like putting stuff all around the walls. I might hit the floor. I might hit the ceiling. I don't know. You can't act. You don't know what to do. Imagine if sometimes, if God forbid, if cars can spontaneously come out of nowhere and down the street and hit people, they don't have to be seen. They could just spontaneously come out of nowhere. So you wouldn't cross the street. You never want to cross the street. Like, don't do that. It's like you're taking a risk. You're at 50-50. Like, so we have to, I like to say this, but, I dealt with teens for a very long time, helping my wife in deprogramming. You have parents that are very, very nice parents, and they're good parents. You have parents that are very strict parents, and they're good parents. But if a parent acts inconsistently, if they're erratic in their behavior, the child grows up very, very, it's very difficult. It's a big difficulty in parenting. It's a big problem because the child never understands what button to push. A child innately wants to make their parents happy. And they never understand what button to push because today it's this and tomorrow it's that. So the child is always on edge. The child grows up with certain anxiety. So Hashem allows us a relationship. For whatever reason, Hashem allows us a relationship, but that's the way he created the world. And there are names that we give to those relationships. Specifically, the name Elohim is the name that calls on Hashem's mastery of all forces of the world, of every what's the word I'm looking for? Of every principle, of every force, of every property in this world, from the electromagnetic force to the gravitational force to the cosmic weak force, the cosmic strong force, to the fact that neutrons and that protons and electrons, they go around a neutron. I mean, every single thing, the fact that things are consistent in this world, the fact that there is such a thing as consistent psychology, and there's a thing that's called weather, every single force, if you can give a natural force in this world, nature, I guess what we call nature, if you can give, there is patterns of nature in this world, then they are created as an aspect that we refer to as Elohim. By the way, that's why Elohim is plural. It's the only name of it. It's a plural name of Hashem. What do you mean Elohim? Because Kel means power. Elohim means powers. Because the power behind all of reality is Elohim. It's a fascinating thing, by the way. In the Torah, it's the only name of Hashem that's done. The Torah, we have the word Elohim not only used in ways that are not holy. We talk about judges as being Elohim, because anything that is a power over you, the judges in Parshas Mishpatim, in the chapter of Mishpatim, which is in it's the sixth parsha in Shemot. The Mishpatim, it says, V'yisho Adonav El Elohim. It's talking about a servant who his master brings him over to the Elohim. Elohim there doesn't mean God at all. It means judges. It means to the court. But they're powers. The powers over me. And as a matter of fact, it's even weirder because we could refer to other gods with the name of God, Elohim Acherim, the other gods. And the Nefesh HaChaim in this very chapter makes this point. It says it just means powers. It means the powers. And Hashem, being the power of all powers, is referred to as Elohim when we're using it in a holy sense. So now we can start to understand. Humanity is created with Tselem Elohim, with a likeness to Elohim. The same way Hashem is able to control, manipulate, empower reality. A human being was given that ability as well. Atzelem Elokim. So let's take one more level. Mitzvahs. The Nefesh HaChaim takes it to mitzvahs. He says you should know that every single action a human being makes in this world has the ability to affect, because this person is a human, and they're created with a tzelem Elokim, with the demus of Elokim. They're created with the likeness of Elokim. They have the ability to affect the entire cosmos. And he talks about, he says, you should know, but pre-Matan Torah, before we talk about the experience at Sinai, when the Jews stood at Sinai and got the Torah, before we talk about that experience, a person can theoretically be in tune to what's right. Say, this is right and this is wrong, and be able to say, I've really worked on myself. I've worked on my connection with Hashem, and I really, really see that this is what Hashem wants. That's true until the Sinai experience. And this is what the Nefesh HaChaim says. But once Sinai comes around, once the giving of the Torah comes around, another dimension exists. Because now specific actions, Hashem demands specific actions and act with those specific actions. And there's a hierarchy of those specific actions. Let me give an example. I give an example of, let's say, a child. I leave my child and I tell my child, go play outside. I'm like, go play outside and enjoy yourself. So the child will intuitively look to do things that are fun. And I think my child is a mature child. I'll leave my child. I'm not worried about it. I come out day 2 and I see my child playing in the street, and I think it's dangerous. So I come over to my child and I say, you shouldn't play in the street. It's dangerous. So now the child is introduced with a new idea. I come out day 3 and I see my child in the street. So now what's going to happen? I say, you know what? I'll let you go out, but you have to ask my permission first. You need to ask my permission. You have to. You can't go in the street. I start giving rules, because if there is a specific objective I need that child to go through, I can't leave that child to just find their way and be in tune with what's right, because they're not going to. I see that it goes astray. So there now enters a new dimension. You have the ability to figure out what's right, but you also have to maintain your relationship with me. That's what me and the child. You also need to maintain your relationship as a child. And if you disobey me, you're risking your relationship with the parent. Another class I have about understanding relationships via our relationship with Hashem. So the Nefesh HaChaim ends off and he says the following, and I'm going to read you his words. He says, you have to understand that the mitzvahs are there as a specific diet, a specific handbook for you to get this right, for humanity to get this right, for humanity to accomplish its goal of destiny. And there is 2 aspects of every mitzvah, again, not the topic of this class, but the mitzvah itself will affect reality. And the command of the mitzvah also builds a relationship between us and Hashem. And if you give up on either one of those pieces, you're causing destruction. And if you keep both of those pieces, you're building a relationship and you're also changing reality. And now I'm going to read you an English translation. He says, "Those stars are Adam." He says, you should know this is the sum total of humanity. I'm reading it. I have it on my screen here. He says, "Kol ish Yisrael al yomar belibo chason." A person should not say, God forbid, in their heart, "Kimani makochi lifol b'maseh ashfolim shuminyan bolim." What does it make a difference? What does God care if there's tsunamis happening in the world? There's starvation, there's earthquakes. What does God care if I X, Y, Z, figure it out? I speak slander, I move a rock on Shabbos. What does God care? Why is it a big deal? It says, don't say that. Internalize in your being, internalize in your heart, take it to heart, bring it into your mind. Every single action that you do has an effect. It will not get lost. Every single thing that you do will reach the root of reality and will affect reality. They'll reach the lights, the very, very lights that live in the root of reality. Our ability, people look and, there are so many levels of a mitzvah. There's so many levels, and they're good on all levels. They're good for us psychologically. A Torah life is good for us psychologically. A Torah, it's good for relationships. It's good economically. People think we give tzedakah because it's such a nice thing. We give tzedakah because the Torah tells us to give tzedakah. The Torah tells us we should give charity. But no one will deny that it's great for reality. It's great for humanity. Giving charity. It's a great plug for the Portland Call, by the way. You can donate on our website. I guess, but either way, it's great. It's great for humanity. Right? So, but there's more to it. Don't think that just because there is a situation where I don't understand what this mitzvah is about, that you're doing nothing. The same way, if you don't understand what that little pill is doing for you, it's giving you vitamin D that you don't have. And without it, you're going to be sick. You have the ability to affect the world. A human being has the ability to affect the world. That's how we look at the system of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs we tend to think of as commandments, but the Zohar translates them as connections. There are 613 ways that we connect to the spiritual world, to Hashem in the spiritual world. And it's in our hands. It's in our hands. We just have to grab it. Again, we asked at the very beginning, and I want to make sure I cover the points well before we end. That it says that is what's the tselem? What is it? Tselem? A tselem, our tselem Elokim, our demus Elokim means that we have a likeness to Hashem that we too control, that we can affect reality. As a matter of fact, we're the starter. We're always the starter. We start the surf. And why is it Elokim? Why is it tselem Elokim? Because Elokim is it's the God of forces. All of nature is Elokim is of nature. Again, God willing, next class we'll see there's something beyond that. But Elokim is nature. It's the creator and the controller of nature, and we affect nature. We affect the physical and spiritual reality, and that's why there's more than one name of Hashem, because that's the component that we're relating to with our mitzvahs. I'm going to push pause over here, and I am very, very happy to take any questions. I can't do it right now because I do need to. There's a person who's waiting for me that I do need to. It is very important that I speak to. But you are very, very welcome to email, text me. You can see my email on the website. As a matter of fact, you can any questions that you have. I would love to have any conversation if I have the time to talk, or to be able to take it by text or email. And I thank you all for joining. And God willing, next week we will do the second part of it, and I'll probably give a little more of a background in Kabbalah and how Kabbalah came about. But in the second part, we'll talk about the infinite versus finite, what's referred to as Tzimtzum. Everybody, have a great evening.